And you never know when you're going to get a crowd like that again. So, the guys in the locker room, especially myself, we take full responsibility.
The Emilie Cochrane Center was packed for an AAC matchup, but the Owls fell short.
And on the women's team's trip to Houston, their fate wasn't much better.
I'm Emilie Cochrane, live from the Emilie Cochrane Center. The outcome for these Owls was much different against Houston, their second time around. I've got the stats to break down what went wrong in this matchup against the third-ranked team in the nation. Courts in Session is live, and it starts right now.
Hello everyone and welcome to this week's edition of Courts in Session. He's Luke Meli and I'm Brielle.
And Emilie Cochrane will be joining us live in a bit. The men's basketball team welcomed the number 3 ranked Houston Cougars into the Emilie Cochrane Center Sunday night. With so much to play for, first place in the AAC on the line, along with another resume builder as we inch toward March Madness.
Temple looking to sweep a top 10 team for the first time in school history. Jamil Reynolds in the paint spins and lays it in for 2. He finished with 11 points. Houston ball, Cougars get the offensive rebound off a Tremont Mark miss. Reggie Cheney grabs the board and kicks out to a wide open Jamal Shed who drains the 3. On the other end, Hyseer Miller finds Kayla Battle in the corner who knocks down the contested 3. Battle finished with 24 points. Temple inbounding on the baseline and Miller finds Battle in the corner again and he sinks another 3. This is a first half filled with corner 3s. Battle finds teammate Damian Dunn who hits the 3 to put Temple up 34-29. Now Cougars ball, Jawan Roberts has it in the lane and puts it in for 2 to tie things up at 37 in the second half. Dunn gets it taken away by Shed, and he dishes it to Marcus Sasser, who gets the and 1. Sasser finished the game with 13 points. Cougars are starting to roll, up 46-39 until Shed nails this 3, making it a 10-point game. A flagrant 1 is called on this play right here, where you see Nick Jordan trying to fight through a screen set by Emmanuel Sharp on an inbounds play, but he lowers his shoulder and pays for it. Now Jaleel White in the corner, and he's going to pass up a wide open 3, and he drives and kicks it to Dunn on the perimeter, and he hits the 3. Temple trails by 5, but it doesn't get any closer. Cougars go on a 10-0 run to start the second half, and the Owls aren't able to put up points. Temple shot 7 for 24 in the second half. Your final score from the Emilie Cochrane Center is Houston 81, Temple 65.
Well, I think it's something we've been fighting all year long. I think, when the ball is going in for us, like most people, good things are happening. You get excited and got more energy and effort. And when that didn't happen for us in the second half, if guys made a mistake or missed a shot, just drop their head and next play, just keep playing.
Yeah, that's what's really upsetting. We don't really get a crowd like that. We got a crowd like that, and I feel like we disappointed the crowd. And you never know when you're going to get a crowd like that again. So, the guys in the locker room, especially myself, we take full responsibility.
Battle's talking about the whiteout at the Emilie Cochrane Center. According to the team, it was their first sellout since 2020. Battle's 24 points marked his 11th game with 20 or more points this season, but the turnover bug bit Temple again, with 15 Temple turnovers leading to 21 Houston points. It was Jarris Walker and Marcus Sasser who combined for 36 and led the Cougars to 48 second-half points. The loss snaps a 4-game Temple winning streak.
So the first half of the men's game against Houston looked promising. Guys were hitting big shots, and they held Houston to just 33 points in the first 20 minutes of play. Now, Houston trailed at the start or at halftime for just the 3rd time this season. And another thing, Temple relies heavily on the 3-point shot. They hit 9 in the first half, and the other 10 points came from just field goals and free throws. And then in the second, the Owls went ice cold from 3-point range, going 3 for 10, and they only scored 14 points in the paint compared to Houston's 34, and also Temple only had 4 steals compared to Houston's 9. But defensively, the Owls really need to work on help and recover. They do a great job of helping on defense, but they don't rotate properly, and there were multiple times in the game on Sunday where a Houston player was left wide open in the middle of the lane or under the basket, and Temple also really struggled inbounding the ball. So Houston typically put Jarris Walker, the 6'7" freshman, on Temple's inbounder, which just made it really difficult for Temple to inbound the ball, and it led to some mistakes on inbounds plays.
Yeah, a lot of great points. I want to stick on the defensive rotations. When we saw Houston get a lot of easy buckets to begin that second half with a lot of steals, a lot of turnovers that led to layups, that was those 15 Temple turnovers that led to 21 Houston points. But when it got into the half court, Houston just killed Temple with the pick and roll. Houston scored 48 points in that second half. That's the third most in a half that Temple's allowed all season. And again, those turnovers were killer for Temple. And at the end, you got to give some credit to Caleb Battle. He was really the only reason the Owls were even in this game. His 24 points, again, his third straight game now with 20-plus points. He was hitting some ridiculous shots. Houston coach Kelvin Sampson called it horse shots, this type of shots he was making. But in the end, he wasn't able to get as much help around him, and it led to the loss.
But we can't forget about our third anchor, Emilie Cochrane, who's holding things down from the Leah Cora Center.
Emily, the first time around, Temple shut down Houston's top 2 scorers, but it was a different story in the rematch on North Broad.
That's exactly right, guys. In this first matchup against Houston, the Cougars did not look like the #1 team in the nation. But on Sunday, it was a completely different story. Marcus Sasser and Jarris Walker both had phenomenal games. Walker scored 23 points compared to the 9 points he had in the previous game against Temple. And instead of shooting 52% of the field, the Cougars somehow managed to shoot 72%, taking it up quite a notch. Now, free throws were not prominent on either side of these teams, but what was prominent was the idea that the Cougars could close out this game in the second half, something that Temple has been struggling to do all season. That's all I have from the Leah Cora Center for now, but I will be back in just a few minutes to talk about this ECU game on the women's side. Reporting from the Leah Cora Center, I'm Emilie Cochrane. Guys, back to you in the studio.
Thank you, Emily. Now it's time for us to look ahead to the next matchup for the men, a trip to Texas, this time to face SMU.
Temple looks to get back in the win column against the struggling Mustangs.
SMU coming off a tight loss in this one at the hands of fellow acronym ECU. Early on, Zurich Phelps scores 3 of his 24 points for the Mustangs, but SMU trails by 8 at halftime. Keon Ambrose Hilton gives the Mustangs the lead with 10 minutes to play, but SMU crumbled down the stretch. First, an illegal screen from Mo J turns the ball over. Then, a wide open lane to the rim for ECU's Ezra Osar wraps things up for the Pirates. SMU falls 77-72.
Now, SMU has had a rough go this season. In their last 4 games, the Mustangs have given up 77, 74, 82, and 99 points. They are struggling defensively, allowing opposing teams to score an average of 74 points per game, which ranks 9th in the American. SMU is 8-16 on the season and 3-8 in conference play, and the team is shooting just overall 41% from the floor, which is good for 10th in the American. Lots of numbers here, and none of them are really good. Now another show means another week for Luke and me to break things down.
We've got the keys to the game for the Owls and the Mustangs. Let's start it off with Temple.
So I'm going to kick things off with the men's team. One thing I would like to see them do more often is get Jameel Reynolds involved. He's 6'10", 285 pounds. Get him the basketball whenever you can. There were multiple instances Sunday night where Reynolds would come set a ball screen on the perimeter, and the guards were already dribbling away and not waiting for the screen to develop. Good things happen when the ball is in his hands. He finished with 11 points Sunday, but he should be dominating in the paint against teams. No one on Houston could match up with Reynolds in terms of size. If you're a guard and you see Reynolds' numbers or his chest, feed him the basketball. There were a few instances where he was wide open and calling for the ball, but no one gave it to him down low.
Seems easy enough. Gotta get number 4 the ball. Now I'm going to go over to the SMU side. The Mustangs really struggle from 3-point range. That's something they've struggled with all season. They shoot about 31% from 3. That's 10th out of 11 teams in the AAC. They've only made 156 threes this season. For comparison, Temple's made 186. Now this fits right into Temple's already effective strategy of limiting opponents' long-range shots. Temple holds teams to just 31% shooting from three this season. That's the third best mark in the conference. Now, the Mustangs, as we see here, they're missing some wide open ones, but not all these guys are unreliable. They have one elite option, that's Zach Nuttall. Nuttall leads the team in three-point makes and three-point percentage, shooting about 34% and hitting 49 of them. That's 16 more threes than his next closest teammate. As long as the Owls key in on Nuttall, they'll shut down that SMU downtown offense.
And now it has been about a year since Temple and SMU last played. The Owls took that one 64-57. The Owls are 2-4 in their last 6 games versus the Mustangs. Damian Dunn has played well in Temple's previous 3 matchups against SMU, averaging 16 points per game. And SMU is putting up around 73 points per game compared to Temple's 68.
It's time for a break and time to make that transition to the women's game.
On the other side, Coach Richardson's squad took on the same Houston team, but they were on the road in the Lone Star State. Courts in session. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Former Temple women's player Fionda Fitzgerald signed a WNBA contract with the Chicago Sky on Sunday. Fitzgerald played for Temple from 2013 to 2017, and most recently she was playing overseas in Turkey and was leading the team in scoring, averaging just over 23 points per game. Fitzgerald is the all-time Temple leader in assists with 635 and 1,824 career points, which ranks 5th in program history.
Fionda's former team traveled to the Lone Star State on Saturday, trying to build its own winning streak to 4.
And it's worth repeating, this is a Temple team that is very short-handed with just 8 players on the active roster.
And those 8 players stepped on the floor at the Fertitta Center, and they came out firing. Early in the first quarter, Aaliyah Nelson finds Tiara East for the short jumper. This was one of Nelson's team-high 5 assists. Later in the quarter, Nelson hits Karanda Perea, who finds the bottom of the net from 3. Perea posted her first career double-double in this one. Houston's Layla Blair comes right back with a 3 of her own. She had 5 3-pointers to lead the Cougars. In the second quarter, Nelson knifes through the D and drops in the floater. She had 15 points. Temple led by as many as 14, but Houston does not go away. A Bria Patterson jumper and another Blair 3-pointer cuts the Owls' lead to 3 at halftime. In the third quarter, East puts the Cougars in the spin cycle. She had a team-high 16 points, but Blair keeps firing away from 3. She led all scorers with 25 points. At the end of the third, the Owls in danger of falling out of it until Brittany Garner drops in the hook shot to bring Temple back within 5. Temple didn't stop there. Now to the fourth, East right back to the bucket to make it a 4-point game. With the deficit at 2, of course, it's Blair again for the Cougars, scooping this one home. Nelson tries to bring the Owls back late with a 3, but it's not enough as Temple falls 65-60.
I'm focusing primarily on the first half performance from the Owls. There was a 5-minute stretch in the first quarter where Temple held Houston to 0 for 9 shooting. Both teams were struggling. They were 3 for 16 in the first few minutes of the first quarter. It was a very, very defensive heavy game in the first, especially for Temple. And the Owls even led 15-6 at one point. And Temple also had 3 players in double figures, but defensively is where they really need to pick things up against ECU. Karanda Perea had picked up where she left off. 8 points and 5 boards in just the first quarter alone. And with her efforts, it led to her being awarded the Big 5 honor roll. She finished the game with 10 points and 13 boards. Really nice to see her playing well, getting more opportunities now that there's only 8 players that are active for the team as of right now.
It was a great start for Karanda and all the Owls in that first quarter, but I want to look further into the game, the end of the second quarter, beginning of the third, because that's when momentum really shifted away from the Owls. As I mentioned in the highlight, Temple had a 14-point lead until the final 5 minutes of the second quarter. A big Houston run slashed that lead down to 3. And another issue for the Owls, they shot just 22% from 3, only 4 for 22. And now with both these issues, not being able to keep your opponent down after getting a big lead and struggling to shoot from 3, you'd have to imagine if there's some heavy legs on this team, as you mentioned, with only 8 active players in the lineup, or if it was just an off day for players like East and Nelson. So now, despite those potentially heavy legs, head coach Diane Richardson expressed how proud she is of her team coming together on and off the floor after their 4th straight game with only 8 active players.
That is a key. They have really come together. They fight for each other. They're resilient. And I'm really pleased and proud that they've done that, really banding together. And some players are stepping up that never have had the opportunity to do that before.
Despite the loss, the Owls are playing good basketball over the last 4 games. This streak of 3 wins and 4 tries comes after 2 players were dismissed and 2 others voluntarily left the team. This 3-1 run follows what was a 1-4 stretch of games, which could have plummeted the team down the standings. Instead, the Owls sit in the middle of the pack and are only 1.5 games out of second place in the AAC with 6 games to go.
Time for us to head to break, but when we return, time to break down some plays for the men's and women's teams.
And we'll head back to the Liacouras Center to see what's catching Emily's eye ahead of the women's next matchup. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to Courts in Session. Luke and I each chose plays from the men's and women's game to break things down just a little bit further. So my play is from Sunday night's game against Houston. It's Temple ball, and Damian Dunn has it on the right wing. Now Jamil Reynolds is going to come and set the screen, but Dunn doesn't even look at him. Now Hyseer Miller has it. Reynolds sets the screen and rolls, but no one looks at him. And then Zach Hicks has it on the baseline. He drives, and he also doesn't look at Reynolds. Good things happen when Jamil Reynolds has the ball in his hands. The guards have got to find a way for him to get him the ball. He's 6'10", 285 pounds. They have to find a way to get it to him in the paint.
Man, I need people that got me like you got Jamil Reynolds. I'm going over to the women's game now. Temple down by 3, 7 seconds to go in trying to tie the game. And here's the first play the Owls run out of the timeout. They throw cross court to Tiara East, looking for the wide open Tariana Gary. Now you might be asking, why are they throwing it the length of the floor? It was because Gary is wide open, but it got knocked out of bounds. So the Owls call another timeout. They run another play. That one gets knocked out of bounds. Now the Owls, out of timeouts, have to inbound it from their 3rd different spot on the possession, and to avoid a 5-second violation, Tiara East throws it in. It gets knocked away, and the Owls lose in a tight one to Houston.
Now coming off that close loss at Houston, the women look to get back in the win column versus ECU Wednesday night when they're on the road.
The Owls have experience with the Pirates this season, with ECU coming into the Liacouras Center in early January and winning 72-51.
Now, last time ECU came to North Broad, it was a really close game in the first quarter, Luke. Temple really needs to lock in defensively for Wednesday night's matchup against ECU. ECU is a team who only scores around 60 points per game, and Temple is allowing its opponents to score around 66 per game. And also, last time these teams played, Temple only scored 11 points in the third quarter. The third quarter really seems to be where they struggled the most. Definitely going to need some more offensive production from players like Aaliyah Nelson, Tiara East, and also Enos Piper and Corinne Prey were the only players for Temple to even score in the third quarter the last time that these two teams played.
So you look at Temple's offense, I'll look at ECU's defense. They force over 25 turnovers a game. Temple turned it over 25 times the last time these teams played. But this ECU team isn't unbeatable. They're the worst in the conference at shooting 3-pointers, and they're the worst in the conference at defensive rebounding. So there are avenues for the Owls to really go and beat this ECU team, but they've got to be able to execute.
Now turning things back over to our third anchor, Emilie Cochrane, who's live at the Liacouras Center to tell us who she has her eye on from ECU.
Emily, this ECU team is known for its defense, but there's one player on the offensive side that the Owls defense has to key in on in this game.
That's right, guys. I have my eye on ECU's Danae McNeil. The 6-foot senior guard is averaging 16.4 points per game. Also in AAC play, she's got about 35 minutes per game, which is ironically identical to Aaliyah Nelson, Temple's leading scorer. Now, I actually had the chance to speak with Aaliyah Nelson just the other day at a student athlete conference, and she told me some positives and some negatives about what's going on within the women's basketball team right now. She said a positive is, at the time, they were on a 3-game win streak. Keep in mind this was before the Houston defeat that they did face. But she said a negative is we only have 8 people on our team still. She said, I'm tired, I'm exhausted, and you can imagine being on your feet for 35 to 40 minutes straight with very limited breaks, only really during halftime if a foul is drawn or when a timeout is called. That's kind of the same for ECU's McNeil on the ECU side as well. But for now, we'll turn it over and see what head coach Diane Richardson said about going into this ECU game and what she should expect to see against players just like McNeil.
Yeah, I think ECU, again, is one of those teams that presses. So we've got to make sure we secure the ball and not turn the ball and be very poised against their pressure.
Coach Richardson did say it's going to be super important to pressure these Pirates and be extremely aggressive on the defensive side of the ball, but not just towards senior players like McNeil, also some freshmen like Amaya Joyner, who's averaging about 10 points per game. Reporting for the last time from the Leocore Center today, I'm Emilie Cochrane. Luke and Brielle, back to you in the studio.
Break time, but when we come back, a look into the person behind the men's basketball program who has gotten them into the shape they're in.
And we'll take a look at the road ahead for the men's and women's teams. We'll be right back.
Welcome back. There are 3 members within the athletic department who have the title Director of Performance. Alan Sun is one of these 3 with the job of handling the men's basketball program.
It's no surprise that Division I athletes need to be in tip-top shape, but it takes a team effort to get them there. And at Temple, that team is usually led by Alan Sun.
My title is Director of Performance for men's basketball.
Sun's primary job is to keep the athletes in shape. He oversees strength and conditioning, nutrition, and works closely with athletic trainers.
Also try to make lifestyle changes or help them make lifestyle changes to help them, be healthier and stay injury-free and things of that nature.
Before coming to North Broad, Sun spent 3 years as the head strength and conditioning coach at IMG Academy in Bradenton, Florida.
The teams that I work with, the national teams, it's those are 4 or 5-star guys. It's kind of, the same structure and the same mindset that we have here in college.
This made the transition to Temple easier.
He just knows, what's best for our bodies at the right times. If we need to get 2 or 3 more hours of rest, he's going to tell us.
Sun's role during practice and on game days is limited. You can find him at the end of Temple's bench. Although he might not be active for the full 40 minutes, he's always on call.
I'll warm them up in the beginning. If they need anything throughout practice, if they need a stretch or something like that, I'm available.
Sun is often the unsung hero. He's in charge during those times when no one is really looking. He is constantly taking notes during practice and games, observing how guys are performing to see if they need to take it easy during future lifts and practices. His primary goal is to ensure the players are working properly behind the scenes so they can play at the highest level when all eyes are on them.
The Owls will need those trainers because there's a lot of traveling in the next couple of games for the men's and women's teams. The men take trips to Texas and Tennessee to match up with the Mustangs and Tigers. Meanwhile, the women travel to ECU before returning to North Broad to battle with the Bearcats. The women beat Cincy on the road to earn their 2nd conference win of the season back on January 7th.
Owl Sports Update returns to the air on Thursday at noon with a brand new anchor duo. Matt Rainier is back for another semester on the desk, and Meg Doyle will make her desk debut. They will discuss how women's basketball player Enos Piper has taken on a bigger role as the short-handed Owls try to climb the rankings in the American. Owl Sports Update also talks to gymnastics head coach Josh Nielsen about how he recruits gymnasts, with most not coming from their high school teams.
It used to be really big, and it's just kind of died off because the club programs have taken over.
What do you think That's all at noon on Thursday on TUTV and on our social handles at Owl Sports Update. That'll do it for this edition of Courts in Session.
For this guy, Luke Meli, Emilie Cochrane at the Leocore Center, and our entire crew, I'm the birthday girl, Brielle Berry. Have a great day.